Number one item is discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding TCEQ issuance of proposed permit.
Okay, welcome. We have some visitors here too that have some passion around this topic. So some of you may have heard me talk before in the past about the Wolf Hollow Park plant, which is in Hood County. It is very, very close to the Somerville County line. And as Commissioner-elect Jocelyn likes to say, things like noise, like pollution, like water tables don't know county lines, and that is certainly the case here. So we have been, and I learned this, I want to say in January, that folks within our county and within our city have been feeling negative impacts of a Bitcoin facility. I will not call it a mine because they don't mine anything, but a Bitcoin facility that is currently attached to Wolf Hollow 2, which is at Hood County. My understanding is estimates are about 30% of the electricity from Wolf Hollow 2 is for the purposes of generating energy for the computers that are at this Bitcoin facility. So 30% of that electricity goes directly to the churning of computers to come up with lottery numbers, essentially. Recently, Wolf Hollow has requested, they want to do Wolf Hollow 3. So they want to have an expansion, and that expansion includes an expansion of pollution. And so they have to request permits from TCEQ. So TCEQ sent out notifications to folks impacted about this permit request. And so I heard this read, I went to a meeting last night, and what stood out to me is, this is the notice that went to residents. And what stood out to me was where it says, the proposed facility will emit the following air contaminants in a significant amount: carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and particulate matters. Another thing they talked about last night that was not in here, but that was recognized, is that also includes things like mercury. So an increased introduction of mercury to our environment. And so the question that I posed last night, and the rationale behind the need for this expansion is to stabilize our grid, right? There's going to be increased demand, and so we need to stabilize our grid. And in fact, there was recently testimony to state Congress that said there is going to be an expected doubling of electricity demand in 6 years. So ERCOT has said that they expect the demand to double in the next 6 years. And they specifically said data centers and Bitcoin mines are the primary driver. More than 50% of their expectation of this doubling is coming from those. And so the question that I posed to TCEQ, and particularly to Constellation Energy, who's making this request, was, obviously sometimes we have to, pollution or poison, really, is a part of our world. It's something that we all have to deal with. But the question is, how thoughtful are we in expending that pollution in a way that is necessary? So there's a difference between pollution that is absolutely critical and necessary. We need to make sure people's houses stay warm in February, and pollution for, say, the purposes of, I don't know, a big, huge lottery machine that most folks will never benefit from. And in fact, many of our county residents are currently being harmed by. And so my position, and what I'm asking the council to consider, is to, I personally requested last night that this permit not be granted on that basis. And my request was, hey, we don't know if it's necessary yet. And just like at home, this is the example I shared last night, is if I'm bumping up against my budget, I don't just go to my boss and say, I need more money. My expenses have gotten too high. I have to manage my expenses. And so I have to cut the Netflix, or I have to get the electricity, lights turned off, or what have you. And right now they're not doing that. They're not looking for ways that they can minimize the pollution. Instead, they're just saying, please let us pollute some more. And in this case, let us pollute more for the purposes of an industry that is unquestionably doing harm. There may be questions about the health impacts, et cetera, but there is no question that people aren't sleeping. And there is no question that a lack of sleep is harmful to people. No one's disputing that. And so I submitted a letter requesting that they do not provide this permit. What you've got in our city council packet is the Hood County Commissioners Court met and unanimously agreed to submit a resolution formally requesting TCEQ to not approve these permits, so that there's a formal request that's coming from that municipality, not just from the individuals on it. So what you have in your packet is that I've based that resolution, removed some things that weren't pertinent to us, And certainly we have some folks here who can speak, and I know that Commissioner-elect Jocelyn has spoken with countless residents in that precinct that have shared with him some of the issues and concerns that they have. So that's what I'm asking, is for us to pass that resolution urging TCEQ to not grant the permit. Whew, I know. There's a lot.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is that a copy of the TCEQ letter?
Yes, and I will make copies and give you copies for sure.
Mayor,
Yeah, go right ahead.
so I was also at that meeting last night, and I want to say it was probably in the neighborhood of 200 Somerville and Hood County families that are highly impacted by this and are very concerned. Of the citizens that were all up there that came to speak, and I just want to say we were there from what time did it start? 6 or 5:30?
We 7.
So,
No, 7. Yeah.
We didn't get out of there till probably closer to 10. It was a very long night and very busy night. But anyway, where I was going with this is everybody that spoke, there was not a single solitary individual that came up forward that said, I would like this approved. Every citizen that spoke or that either had questions or comments basically said they do not support this, and they asked TCEQ to please do not honor this permit.
we have a couple of people present that like to speak. Cheryl Shadden.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Shadden. I live in Hood County. I live right across the street from Wolf Hollow and Marathon Digital. So the TCEQ public hearing last night, one of the reasons that we got that hearing is because Dwayne Burns, House Representative for Johnson and Somerville County, asked for it. He was kind enough to sign on to that when our politicians would not. So he is concerned. That's one of the reasons we got that. Last night was a public hearing. You can have public comments, but we're asking for a contested hearing, which means judicial. Tomorrow is a deadline. So you can get on TCEQ's website. You can ask for contested hearing. We all are. It doesn't mean they're going to grant it, but if this is a concern for this county at all, and Hood County, you need to do this. We're hoping to take them to court. Now, that doesn't mean anything. TCEQ can do whatever they want. So even if you have a judge that rules in your favor, TCEQ can still issue a permit. Now, they may make them alter it or do something different, but all of this pollution that's going to hit Hood County and Somerville County, not to mention the additional noise that's coming with all of this, is unacceptable.
Thank you, Cheryl. We also have John Highsmith.
Oh, I'm John Highsmith. I live in Pecan Plantation, and I got involved in this effort back in January, where our county commissioner had a meeting, and she does these regular meetings, and several members of the community, both from Hood County and Somerville County, got up and spoke, and I would just tell you, it was heartbreaking. The suffering that they've encountered, dealt with, it continues on. That's from the noise. Now we're really alarmed about what the Constellation Energy wants to do, because what we learned last night was, the way TCEQ does this is they don't do any monitoring, physical monitoring of the emissions. All right. It's all a model. It's all hypothetical. The monitoring station for this region is in Midlothian, which is just astounding. So what that means is, if they have an excursion, well, I just don't know about it. It's not going to be measured. Nothing's going to be collected. So a lot of concern about this. We have a number of power plants, gas power plants in the area. Those are in Hood County, but that wind, it'll take it over into Somerville County. So our feeling is that we've got to get things like this document that you all are looking at, because this goes to the legislators. They're the ones who can put some pressure on TCEQ. But that's what we're asking for. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you for coming, John.
I have a question of John.
John has a question
John,
for you. Sorry.
You said a word, you said excursion. That sounds like a technical term. What's that mean?
Well, the way the permits are written is they are not to exceed certain levels on, let's take one of the constituents. This is actually one, sulfuric acid mist. Okay, it will emit sulfuric acid mist. So they'll come up with, okay, you can't have more than this amount. You go over, then that's an excursion. That's just what they call it.
But to piggyback on what he said, that's so important is they don't have a thing out there measuring. There's no contraption taking it in. And in fact, when they do their annual visit, they get notification ahead of time of when so we said, when do you actually test the air? Well, they test it in an annual visit. Okay, is that annual visit a surprise? Like I get audited, surprise, we're here. Is it a surprise? It is not. It is scheduled and they know when they're coming. And just frankly speaking, this particular business has not demonstrated good citizenship with its neighbors. You want to talk about friends and neighbors? They are not. And so they're saying we're only going to use 40% of capacity. So they've applied to only be able to use 40%. So first they're saying we're only going to use 40% and then we're only going to pollute this much, of which there's no one measuring what percent they use and there's no one measuring how much they're going to pollute. And so it's essentially the honor system with an industry that I consider to be dishonorable.
Have John tell you about mercury.
Okay,
John, tell us about
I
mercury.
don't want to take up all your time.
This is an important issue.
Okay, mercury is a very bad actor. Okay, and neurological issues with very, very minute amounts of mercury. To give you an example, I was in the hazardous waste business. So we burn hazardous waste in cement kilns. And if a stream came in and the mercury tested higher than 2 parts per billion, we rejected the stream. That was too much. But because this isn't in the hazardous waste realm, okay, and what is alarming is if you Google or research, is there mercury in natural gas? And I have a problem with it even being called natural gas because it's kind of a misnomer. But it'll tell you it can have up to 5,500 parts per million. Okay, so you have a fuel source where you know there's mercury. And what you would have is no real testing for the mercury. So you really don't know, but it doesn't take much to really damage people's health.
Thank you.
And this mercury then ends up going into the Brazos as well as Lake Granbury and also our reservoir.
Yes, that's what it's known for, is for bioaccumulation. So if you've ever gone to the store, some places you see, like for some certain kinds of fish, it'll have a mercury warning. Don't eat more than, this 3 times a month or something, whatever it is, because the fish will uptake that mercury that gets into any kind of water drinks.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, John. I think that's it.
I have one other question.
All right, George.
So, reading this letter, everybody's familiar with it. The executive director has determined that the emissions, blah, 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 will not violate any state or federal air regulations. Then the next page says the meeting was last night. Is this still a timely?
Yes, because they're taking feedback from us up until tomorrow, end of the day tomorrow. And I spoke with the person collecting that and she gave me the direct email to send it to. And so that would be the plan, would be to send it to them on that email, to also send it to Burns' office, to send it to Birdwell's office, to send it to the CEO of Constellation, because they're the ones that are requesting this and they're the ones that are that are the tenants to the mine that is drawing so much of this power off of the grid. And I would say this, even if we didn't have one single person in Somerville County affected by this, which every time I go to a meeting, 5 more people come up to me. Troy was telling me he was at church and they were talking about it. Even if it wasn't one Somerville County resident, these are our friends and neighbors in Hood County and in our state and in our country. So I would have brought this forward whether we had folks here being affected by it or not. But the fact that we do, I feel compelled that it's no longer an act of partnership, but instead an act of representation.
Make a motion to approve the resolution as presented.
I'll second it.
All in favor? 5-0 passes.
Thank y'all very much. This is gonna mean a great deal to folks. I also want to recognize Commissioner Harris was there last night, and Commissioner Harris has been at every meeting that I've been at, so he's been dedicated to this as well. Thank y'all for coming in and sharing.
Thanks.